Hey everyone. Today's scripture lesson comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verses 16 through 21. This section of Isaiah is often called Second Isaiah. We're not sure if Isaiah wrote it. Probably he did not, but someone who was a student of his, someone in the community who's reflecting on the Babylonian captivity, where the brightest and best of Israel's folks are taken to Babylon when they lose the war with the Babylonians, and the folks who are left home are feeling some kind of way. This is a text that is about encouragement, and I want you to listen to it through the ears of someone who might be feeling like they were being punished, that their life had changed drastically because there had been a disastrous experience. Maybe the political environment was, rocky, shaky, and these people were listening to find out, what did they do wrong? What happened so that this happened? And what's the way out of it? And so here is this word from 2nd Isaiah. Thus says the Lord, who makes a way in the sea, a path in the mighty waters, who brings out chariot and horse, army and warrior. They lie down, they cannot rise, they are extinguished, quenched like a wick. Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The wild animals will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches, for I give water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert, to give drink to my chosen people, the people whom I formed for myself, so that they might declare my praise. This is the word of God for the people of God. When you get to be my age and you've been preaching for, 35 years, you come across these texts more than one time, and this text always caught my imagination. I'm about to do a new thing. Can you not perceive it? In fact, when I first got to Middle Church in 2004, this text was in the backdrop of our vision statement, that God called us to do a bold new thing on the earth. Could you not perceive it? We've had many conversations about this, different staff, board members. What is this new thing that we're called to do? And this text was for me in the background that Middle Church had a 20-year ministry with Gordon Ardrod, my predecessor. And I don't know, some of you know, but I came to study Middle Church when I was getting my Ph.D. I was studying identity development, racial, sexual, gender identity development, and I was trying to figure out what kind of leader it takes to staff, to build, to create a multi-ethnic, multicultural, many-gendered congregation. So I studied Cecil Williams out at Glide. God bless his heart. He died earlier this year. I studied a Puerto Rican woman in New York, in Trenton, who was a New Yorker. I studied a African-American woman whose father was a jazz musician. I studied a white Southern gentleman whose father was a physician, and a Korean man. So a Korean, a Puerto Rican, black, a white folks to see what did they have in common. Anyway, I'm digressing. When I came to study Middle Church, I didn't know, but Gordon was about to have a transition. He had been serving the church for 20 years. He was feeling the timing of his time, and I ended up getting hired to succeed him. The church that Gordon had come to pastor was not the one from which he retired. The church that he came to pastor had, 21 old Polish ladies, he would say, and the Middle Church choir, the paid choir, the green choir, would sing, and would be more people in the choir than in the congregation. That's what was happening in 1985 when Gordon came to serve the church. It was 1985. Middle had been a big church under the previous pastor, It had dwindled in size because the neighborhood had changed, because the East Village went from a kind of collegey, university, folks coming to church to 1980s, rent, artists that were poor, struggling, neighbors that were struggling, HIV/AIDS crisis, worrisome, stigmatized, lots of people, artists, dying from HIV/AIDS. And there was Gordon Jott called to this church, called to actually put this church to rest, right? Put this church to rest. And what he did instead of putting the church to rest was flung open the doors and said, y'all are welcome here. So there were funerals done where folks couldn't find a place. There was love given. A program called Celebrate Life encouraged the people who were living and dying from AIDS to come get health care, to get tested, to think about jobs. Programs grew out of that. Butterfly program grew. Danita Branham's idea to take sandwiches to the park to feed the folks that were struggling. We had a food pantry, like a grocery store. You could actually sort of shop and get groceries. A clothing closet, and the gospel choir, were all these kinds of programs that grew up around Middle, sitting in a neighborhood that needed love and support. And because Middle gave the community love and support, the church grew, and Gordon came to a church of 21 people and left a church of about 450 people 20 years later. I'm about to do a new thing was a text that resonated for Gordon. And God indeed was about to do a new thing in the place of a kind of empty space, a new thing where old things had failed, a new thing where people who maybe felt church wasn't for them would find their way to church. And that new thing just kept cycling. When the Twin Towers were destroyed on 9/11, the people who were fleeing the debris and the disaster going north came up 2nd Avenue to Middle Church and came in the building for water and food and a place to be. Jocelyn Liu, who's an author and one of our elders, beautiful woman, wrote a book about this experience, and her now grown woman, Gracie, was a toddler. And what that time was like, what that day was like, what that space was like, what the space was like that Middle created in those times. I'm about to do a new thing, says God. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? Y'all, we had a fire. Middle Church, like the whole world, was suffering and struggling with not an AIDS crisis, but with COVID-19. Lots of our people lost people. Lots of our people lost jobs. Lots of our people were houseless and destitute and in trauma. And then we had a fire on December 5th, 2020, that destroyed our sacred space. A fire that started in the building next door to us, a fire that frankly still burns every day for those of us who are in these meetings about the building and about reconstruction and about raising money, like a trauma that keeps on happening because you can't let it go, you can't forget it. And there's other fires burning. The COVID-19 trauma, the fire itself. The collegiate church was in a tough real estate deal around that same time. The whole world was on fire, if you will, with what's next, how are we going to be? We had an election in which Donald J. Trump became the president of the United States. And for people like us, for people like me, that presidency was a traumatizing event, a fire burning all the time, with racism, fascism, anti-immigrant, S-hole nations, just ugliness, right? Just not kind, unkind, broken conversations that just set us on edge and made our teeth hurt. It was terrible. So a fire, a global pandemic, a presidency that features an insurrection, and queer people, trans people, black people, female people, pregnant people, poor people, Asian people, poor Asian people, your fault that we got COVID, not. But, you know, the rhetoric, the anger, the venomous talk, it's been hot mess. And this text was speaking to Gordon and the congregation 20 years ago, is speaking to me and us today. This text, I'm about to do a new thing. I'm about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Can you see it? Do you perceive it? When I used to preach this text, when this text used to come up in the lectionary passages 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago even, I would think as I heard the words, don't remember the former things, that maybe Isaiah, the writer, was saying to Israel, don't remember the things that you think you did that were bad, that made God punish you, let you have war, let you lose the war, let your people be sent off to Babylon. Don't remember those things. I thought, yeah, God doesn't want us to hang on to wounds that have happened, or hurts that have happened, or a feeling of sin and brokenness that has happened. Forget those things. Now here's a new thing. But today, now, as an older person reading this text, right, and the text might not change, but the words do, the meanings do, the interpretation does, because we change, I change. I don't remember the former things, don't remember the bad things you did that caused the trauma, because I no longer believe that there's an attachment between my behavior and what's happening in the world. Let me say that again. I no longer believe that a girl who, makes love to her fiance 2 weeks before the wedding and then has a car accident, that there's a quid pro quo or a cause and effect. I am that girl that had the sex 2 weeks before the wedding, and I am that girl who had the car accident. And in my former theology, hear me when I'm saying, in my former theology, the former things, I made a connection between what I did and what God did, which is to say, I did something bad, and then God did something to teach me about it. No, bad things happen. Trauma happens. War happens. Fires happen. You can just be sitting in your house calling for help, and it could be your last pot of water boiling on the stove. It could be your last time of peace because a police officer might shoot you in the head. God bless Sonia Massey. God bless Sonia Massey. She didn't do anything bad for that to happen to her. Middle Church, we didn't do anything bad to have a fire happen to us. Some people said, good on those queer people having a fire. Good on those infidels having a fire. We didn't do anything to deserve a fire. The world didn't do anything to deserve COVID. These questions of theodicy, when bad things happen, unfortunate things happen, we kind of look around and think, well, what did we do to make it happen? I think those kinds of theologies make us feel more in control than just acknowledging that there's just some rough stuff in the universe, and sometimes it comes your way. I don't any longer think that this text means forget the bad thing you did that caused God to punish you by sending Babylon beat you up. I now think the text is saying, forget about your former theological understanding. Forget about that. And God's about to do a new thing, meaning if you think God can do some stuff and did some stuff before Israel, don't you remember this God who loves you, heard your cry, and delivered you from bondage, delivered you from slavery? This text nods back to the Exodus text, right? Where God leads them out in a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire, where the chariots and horses of Pharaoh's people come to chase down Israel, and God opens up the sea so they can get through on dry land and get to the next place on their journey that God has promised them. Like, you think that was good? The text is saying, see? God who brings out chariot and horse, it says, who brings out army and warrior, and they can't get up, and the water opens up, and the Israelites get through on dry land. I'm about to do a new thing. If you think that was something, now I'm going to put rivers in the desert, not open up a sea and give you dry land, but take the wilderness, take the wildness, and I'm going to put water, rivers through the desert, springing forth, right? This water springing forth. I, who am God who loves you, forget that. This is what I can do. I'll make a way in the wilderness. I'll make rivers in the desert. I'll give water to the jackals and the ostriches, and I will certainly give drink to my chosen people. I will do that for myself because I delight in them, so they can declare my praise. So our relationship, this kindredness, will be restored and refreshed. I think this text now feels to me not like a text of sort of forgive God for being a punishing God, but I feel like this is a text of resetting the relationship. And it's a text about hope. That there is a loving, amazing God who lights the way for a church like Middle Church to fling open its doors in love to people living and dying with HIV/AIDS, to kids who are living in tenements and don't have toothbrushes or milk. That's in our story. Come to this place and get food. Come to this place and get healthcare. Come to this place and make music and art. I'm about to do a new thing. Can you not perceive it? This faithful, loving, generous God rescued us from the fire. I mean, we had a fire and the building burned down. But this loving, gracious, doing a new thing God reminded us that we knew how to turn on cameras. Not just shooting the back of heads, but straight to camera like this, making a worship movie, choir people singing in Zoom squares, little kids singing in Zoom squares, dancing that we resuscitated from old tape and put together and built a new way to worship in a digital space where people found us who never knew we existed because the story of the fire got told in Bendigo, Australia, and in Beijing, China, and in Paris. Am I being clear? This God who rescued Israel from Egypt, from bondage, this God who promises to make rivers in the desert, to make a way out of no way, this God also took our little charred selves, our little burnt up souls, our little heartbroken selves, and gave us something else, something refreshing, something new, something innovative, something we never could have done before. Never. Nothing could have caused us to do it before. I'm not saying God caused the fire, because I don't think God did. And I don't know that I think God caused Babylon to trump all over Israel. But that's a whole, we're going to have 16 more sermons on what's good and what's bad. How do we get here? But in this moment, I want to say, I read this text and I feel hope. This is the kind of text that I read and I think, man, even with an insurrectionist who's a liar, but not a Christian, he said today, leading a movement of white Christian nationalism to take away the rights of trans and queer and black and female, poor people, immigrant people, a movement that will ban even more books, not let parents take care of their children the way they want to, insist on women having babies that they don't want to have. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible ideology masquerading as a theology on the rise. And yet God, right? And yet God, and still God, and still us. Like today, Zane and I are out in the streets with the friends we have from Stonewall, from marriage equality, from gun violence control, for HIV/AIDS, for Black Lives Matter, intersectional, over there's this one and that one and this one from this one and that one, and all the relationships that we have where we see each other and we hug each other and we recognize each other and we know we're moving together toward love and justice. That's what Zane and I did today. Amanda went down to Washington, D.C. a few days ago with Mira and Adrian from Riverside Church, and they're down there, standing up for us and standing against white supremacy all over the city and all over the nation. We are in relationship with other people of faith and people of just moral courage and wild imagination, making a better nation, making a better world, standing against the terror that is Benjamin Netanyahu, that is, though he is Jewish, a kind of manifestation of this white supremacist ideology that's floating around the globe. Standing together on a bus, marching, protesting, carrying our placards, we are in relationships that I believe are blessed by God, centered in love, that are new and powerful and carving new things in a broken world. Our voters reform group, I cannot talk, our voters reform group writing postcards. Our queer folks standing up with each other, our multi-everything congregation leaning in to love. This is the kind of text you read when you need hope. It's the kind of text that reminds us that God will surprise us with new possibilities, new questions, new ideas, new projects, new staff, new lay people. Who could have imagined Vicki Burns, our chair, learning all the things about construction and kicking butt at it, just making it happen? Mark Reed, who raised his kids in our church, just at all the meetings, staffing this new program. Who could have imagined that Majora Carter and her husband James Chase would get in on this second project now and be ready to help us to imagine what happens after we rebuild 50 East 7th Street? Who would have imagined that we'd have a team of leaders like the ones on our board? Who would have imagined you, my loves, just being yourself and just showing up and showing out? I feel emotional and I feel hopeful because God. I feel emotional and I feel hopeful because God is doing something new. Can you see what I see? Can you see 21 people becomes 450 people, becomes a movement of 2,000 people? Can you see the relationships we're in across the country, and yes, even around the globe, where like-minded people are working together to heal what's broken, including ourselves? Can you see our babies learning how to be leaders? Can you see what I see? I see reason to hope, loves. I was revisiting some of my hope literature, and I went and read again the poem that June Jordan wrote to honor the 40,000 women and children who, on August 9th in 1956, presented themselves as bodily protest against the dump us, which was like, now women are going to have to carry passes in apartheid South Africa. And this is what June Jordan wrote. Our own shadows disappear as the feet of thousands by tens of thousands pound the fallow land into new dust that, rising like a marvelous pollen, will be fertile. Even as the first woman whispering imagination to the trees around her made for righteous fruit. From such deliberate defense of life as no other still will claim inferior to any other safety in the world. The whispers, too, they intimate to the inmost ear of every spirit now aroused, they carousing in ferocious affirmation of all peaceable and loving amplitude, sound a certain unbounded heat from a baptismal smoke where, yes, there will be fire. And the babies cease alarm as mothers raising arms and heart high as the stars, so far unseen, nevertheless hurl into the universe a moving force, irreversible as light years traveling to the open eye. And who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains, and if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Those women and children were singing, "Don't strike a woman," because the woman is too strong. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Can you see what I see? Barack Obama, in his book about audacious hope, The Audacity of Hope, wrote, "The best way to not feel hopeless is to get up and do something. Don't wait for good things to happen to you. If you go out and make good things happen, you will fill the world with hope, and you will fill yourself with hope." Middle family, you beautiful, amazing, wild, crazy, gorgeous, fantastic lovers of life and light, workers of justice and peace. I hope because you are the bold new thing. I hope because our faith in God, however we name them, him, her, it, love, our faith is a tie that binds us together. I feel hopeful because you are you, and I feel loved inside our system, and that grace is liberating us and freeing us. I am clear, as President Obama said, the change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and we are the change we seek. God is using us, calling us, equipping us, enthusing us, inspiring us, enlivening us with all the gifts we need to rebuild our church, our Center for Spirituality, Justice, and the Arts, our church, but also to rebuild the fabric of love in this nation and to rebuild our own souls, our sometimes broken-hearted souls. Come on, y'all. God is about to do a new thing, a bold new thing on the earth. Can you see what I see? I see our role in it. And I'm so filled with hope for all the ways, even in the face of evidence to the contrary, that our love will win. May it be so.